All right, today we're diving into the kind of shadowy world of real estate, specifically a new fight brewing in Washington state over these so-called secret home listings. There's a new bill that's trying to drag them out into the open, and we're going to break down exactly what that could mean for you.
I mean, it's a super frustrating thought for anyone trying to buy a house, right? You spend all this time scrolling through Zillow, Redfin, the MLS. But what if there's this whole other market you don't even get to see? That's the exact question at the heart of our explainer today.
Okay, so to really get what this old debate is about, we've got to understand the main idea here. What in the world are we even talking about when we say private listings? Well, a private listing is basically real estate's version of a secret menu. It's a house that's for sale, but instead of being blasted out to everyone, it's quietly shown to this exclusive network of agents or their best clients. You know, an agent might do this to create some buzz, maybe test out a price, or just keep things private for the seller.
But here's the problem. If you're not in that exclusive club, you might never even know your dream home was up for grabs. And this practice can seriously limit your choices. And yeah, it raises some big questions about whether everybody's really getting a fair shot in the housing market.
So, to deal with these exact concerns, lawmakers in Washington state are looking at a new bill. Let's get into Senate Bill 6091, which is designed to tackle this whole issue head-on and hopefully create a more open market.
And the group that's really pushing for this, Washington Realtors, they're framing the whole thing in really clear terms. This quote from their incoming president, Ryan Beckett, basically says the goal isn't about getting in the middle of industry squabbles, it's about being as consumer-friendly as humanly possible. So how is this bill supposed to actually work? How does it make things more consumer-friendly? Well, it all really boils down to one key requirement. The core rule is actually pretty simple. The bill isn't trying to ban these private networks altogether. Brokers can totally still market a home to their special contacts. But, and this is the giant, crucial but, they can only do that if the property is also being marketed to the general public at the exact same time. And you might be wondering, what exactly counts as publicly marketed? Well, the bill is super flexible on this point. They call it being platform neutral. It doesn't force anyone onto the MLS. A listing on a broker's own public website would work just fine. The whole point is that it has to be accessible to the entire community, not just a handful of insiders. And this table here kind of lays out how different Washington's approach really is. If you look at the National Association of Realtors policy, it's way stricter. It says you have to get it on the MLS within a day, and it bans this kind of pre-marketing. The regional Northwest MLS is pretty much the same. The Washington bill, it's way less restrictive. It just says, hey, market it publicly, but it lets the broker decide how. Now, the bill also has some really important common sense exceptions built right in. It gets that not every single seller wants a ton of people walking through their house. So, for totally legitimate reasons, like health problems, safety risks, or maybe just a need for confidentiality, that public marketing rule just wouldn't apply. Okay, so it's really important to understand that this isn't just a Washington thing. This isn't happening in a vacuum. Washington's proposal is actually part of a much, much bigger conversation that's happening all over the country. See, there's a ton of tension in the real estate world right now. You've got these huge brokerages like Compass, who really like having more flexibility in how they market homes, clashing with platforms like Zillow and the regional MLSs, who've been pushing for much stricter public listing rules. This bill is basically trying to find a path right through that minefield. And, you know, this quote from Ryan Beckett again really drives that point home. Washington Realtors is saying, look, we deliberately tried to stay out of the corporate food fights. By framing the bill around the consumer and transparency instead of industry rules, they're hoping to find some middle ground that pretty much everyone can get behind. And you can see this is absolutely becoming a trend. Wisconsin just passed a very similar law. Illinois introduced one last year. And now, of course, Washington is getting in on the action. It seems like states are starting to write these rules into actual law instead of just leaving it up to industry groups to decide. So let's boil this all down. What's the real takeaway here? Why should the average person actually care about a bill like this? Well, the motivation really comes down to these three big things. First, just giving people a full, transparent look at the market. Second, it's about addressing potential fair housing issues, because, let's be honest, these private networks can sometimes, even unintentionally, leave certain communities out. And third, it's about creating a more level playing field where all buyers have access to the exact same information. And it looks like lawmakers in Washington are on board with these ideas. The bill has sponsors from both sides of the aisle, in both the state Senate and the House. And that suggests it has a very, very real shot at becoming law.
So here's the bottom line. We could be watching the start of a really fundamental shift here, a move away from these exclusive, secret menus and toward a much more open, accessible, and transparent real estate market for everyone. The big question is, will this trend keep going? And how is it going to completely reshape the way we all buy and sell homes across the entire country?